Hello friends, this video on respiration in plants part 2 is brought to you by examfear.com. No more fear from exam. So let us talk about plants exclusively. Now what happens in case of plants? We saw in our previous lesson that plants prepare their own food and that is why they are known as the autotrophs. So plants are the autotrophs. They can prepare their own food and they do not depend on anybody else. Now they prepare their food by photosynthesis in presence of sunlight. Now the food is prepared in the form of glucose or starch and it is generally stored in the form of starch, but it is like the simplest form is glucose. What is starch? Starch is nothing but a polysaccharide and glucose is a monosaccharide. By now you know all these things, so it is easier for you to understand them. So when we talk about the food prepared by the process of photosynthesis, it is basically glucose. So now this glucose needs to be utilized for energy. Now the question is, how is glucose going to provide that energy? Can glucose directly be used? For example, the plants prepare glucose. So glucose is transported to each and every part of the plant. So can that glucose be directly utilized for energy, for providing energy to different plant parts? So no, that is not the case. The energy which we are talking about, that energy needs to be provided in some other form. So we will talk about that also very soon. So as I said, in presence of sunlight by the process of photosynthesis, food is prepared in the leaves. So what happens during the process of photosynthesis? Light energy gets converted into chemical energy. And what is that chemical energy? Glucose is prepared. So the energy of the light is now stored in the form of chemical energy in the bonds of glucose. What is glucose? Glucose is C6H12O6. So there are so many bonds between carbon, hydrogen and oxygen, and these bonds store the energy. Right? Now the question is, how can we utilize this energy which is stored in the bonds of glucose, and how can that energy be utilized by the plant? So that is what we have to see in this lesson. Please try to understand what are we going to study here. We are not going to talk about how food is prepared. We know that. Okay, food is prepared, glucose is formed. But now what is happening is the energy of sunlight was utilized to prepare food and that energy got converted into chemical energy which is stored in the bonds of the glucose. Now we want to utilize this energy for performing various activities. For example, for transportation, for reproduction, for movement, for excretion, for so many other activities. So the question is, how can we utilize the energy which is stored in the bonds of glucose? So that is the question. So this is glucose and these are the bonds of glucose where my energy is stored and I want to utilize this energy. So now a basic question. Why can't glucose be utilized as it is? I mean, why are we thinking about how can we utilize the energy which is stored in the bonds? Okay, if glucose is formed inside our body and if we know that in the bonds of the glucose energy is present, so fine, distribute that glucose to different parts of the body and then the body will get energy. But is it that simple? Let us try to understand this by taking an example. Now before that, let me tell you the conclusion. Glucose cannot be utilized as it is. It needs to be converted into energy in the form of ATP. What is ATP? These are the energy currencies of cell, that is adenosine triphosphate. So glucose needs to be converted into ATP molecules and ATP molecules are like energy storage. So energy is stored in the ATP molecules. So whenever the body needs energy, they will utilize the ATP molecules. So ATP molecules are like currencies. But the question is why this conversion is needed, and respiration is all about this conversion. This process of converting glucose into ATP is known as respiration and that is what we will talk about in this lesson. But now the basic question is why we need this conversion. If we know that glucose bonds have energy, we can directly utilize glucose. Why are we not utilizing directly? So let us take an example from our day-to-day life to understand why direct utilization of glucose is not possible. Let us imagine that you went out with your dad, maybe to a mall or to a shopping complex or to some other market. And now you want a chocolate. So you tell your dad that, Dad, I need a chocolate. Now, what your dad does? Now your dad have two options. One option is he can give you a chocolate. The other option is he might not give you a chocolate, but he can give you something else that can be converted into a chocolate. So in this case, what your dad did, he said, okay, here's the money for you. So instead of giving a chocolate, he gave you money to buy a chocolate. But what did you want? You wanted a chocolate. Why did you want a chocolate? Because you wanted to eat that chocolate. Maybe because you are hungry, or maybe because you like chocolates, so you wanted to eat it. Now when your dad gives you money, suppose he gives you a 10 rupee note. So will you start eating that 10 rupee note? No. Right? You are not going to eat that 10 rupee note. Because that is not the chocolate. That is not the object in the form you wanted. But at the same time, that 10 rupee note can get you a chocolate. So what will you do in that case? You'll go to a shop with that 10 rupee note and you'll give that 10 rupee note to the shopkeeper, and in return he will give you a chocolate. So you get a chocolate. So now you can eat this chocolate. Right? So the analogy here is that this guy, this boy wanted a chocolate. So he wants the exact thing. He doesn't want it in some other form. Because chocolate in its form only is edible. But the dad gives him money. So when the dad gives him something else, that is money, when he wanted a chocolate, so what he had to do? He had to convert that money into a chocolate. So how did he convert that money to a chocolate? By going to a shop. Right? And that is how you got a chocolate. So in a very similar way, by the process of photosynthesis, now plant needs energy to do so many different activities. Right? So the energy which the plant needs is like the chocolate. So it needs the energy in a particular form. So that particular form is like this chocolate. But now, the leaves of the plant or the green parts of the plant are preparing food by the process of photosynthesis in the form of money. So the glucose is like money. So glucose cannot be utilized as it is by the plant. So the glucose needs to be converted into energy in the form of ATP molecules. So chocolate here is the ATP molecule and money is the glucose. So that is why glucose cannot be directly utilized. Instead, it needs to be converted into energy in the form of ATP. And these ATP molecules will be stored inside the plant. As and when the plant needs energy, it will utilize the ATP molecules. Let us, for example, let us suppose some 100 molecules of ATP are present inside the plant. Now the plant wants to use some energy for reproduction. So he wants some 60 molecules of ATP. So it will utilize 60 molecules of ATP. So as and when required, it will keep on utilizing the ATP molecules. So please understand this part that the plants cannot utilize glucose as it is in its form. The glucose need to be converted into energy in the form of ATP molecules, and this conversion is called respiration. So this conversion of glucose into energy in the form of ATP molecules. So this is your glucose and this is your energy in the form of ATP molecules. So this is how an ATP molecule looks like. It is adenosine triphosphate. So it has 3 phosphate groups. So you can see here, these are the 3 phosphate groups. Then it has an adenosine, that is the adenine group, and a ribose sugar. So this is the ribose sugar and this is your adenine amino acid. So this constitutes the adenosine triphosphate. So it is the energy currency of the cell. So this conversion is known as respiration. So in this lesson, we are actually going to see how this conversion takes place, how glucose is converted into energy in the form of ATP molecules. Thank you. Please visit www.examfear.com to watch more videos, attempt free online test, get free study material, find tutors and mentors. Thank you once again.